Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Strata Stories, where we share an owner strata story and ask an industry professional what everyone could have done differently to improve that experience. So here we go. So today we're talking through Arnold's strata story. It's about his experience of what happens when an outdated building maintenance plan leaves owners blindsided by replacement costs, and the realization that no one truly understood the consequences of the decisions being made along the way. It's definitely a familiar story, so let's see. Before we dive into the story, I want to take a moment to thank you for coming on this journey with us and remind you to please share these episodes with as many owners as possible. So these episodes can only help the owners that it actually reaches. So it's up to us to make sure that we get this out to everybody who needs to hear it. All right, so I really want to talk this one through with Tim Sara. So let's give him a call and see if he can talk us through this story. Here we go. Hi, Tim.
Jody, how you going?
Just letting you know we are currently filming an episode, so you are being recorded. Just wondering if you have time to run through a story with us.
Anytime.
All right, so the story we're going to talk through today is actually Arnold's strata story. So Arnold lives in Palm's apartment, a well-maintained 20-year-old apartment building in the outer suburbs. I bought my apartment off the plan, as have a lot of the owners in this building. It's a nice building. It's maintained well, the levies have stayed pretty reasonable, and everyone gets along well. So we were a bit surprised when the lift started to break down more often than normal. We'd had a lift out of order every week for the past 3 months. Okay, that's a fair bit. We have 3 lifts in the building, so when one is out of order, it doesn't really cause too much of a problem. Okay, but it definitely seemed like something was wrong. I'm on the strata committee, so I emailed the other members and CC'd in the strata manager. Hi everyone, I'm a bit concerned about how often the lifts are being out of order. Do we know what the lift company is saying about why this is occurring? I got a couple of replies from the other committee members confirming that they'd had similar questions, but we didn't hear back from the strata manager. The next week, we received an email from the strata manager booking in our committee meeting for a few weeks' time and advising that we would talk about the lifts at the meeting. Okay, that's fair. When the committee meeting came around a few weeks later, obviously we were all keen to hear what the strata manager had to say about the lift issue. We ran through the normal agenda items, and then we came to the last item, lift maintenance issues. The strata manager confirmed that he'd been in contact with the lift maintenance company regarding the frequency and breakdowns, and they'd come back with a condition report that confirmed that the lifts were coming to end of life. Cool. I spoke up first. What does end of life mean? He scrolled down to the next page on the report where the maintenance company had explained this further. The average elevator is designed to last between 20 to 25 years of service with regular maintenance. Once your elevator begins to approach the end of its lifespan, you may start to experience more frequent and severe issues. These may include breakdowns, unusual noises, or slow elevator speeds. Okay. When you start experiencing these kinds of issues, it's time to consider whether modernisation is necessary. Oh. Before I could say anything, one of the other committee members chimed in. So what does that mean? The strata manager explained that this means we need to start looking at replacing the lifts. I have got quotes both from our existing lift company and 2 other reputable companies. He shared them on screen so we could all see. They were all around the same price, but the prices were huge. Yeah, I can imagine that. I never imagined that the lifts would be that expensive. To be honest, I never really thought about the cost at all. All I could think at that moment was saying, gosh, we have a capital works fund for these things, because I'm not sure some of the owners could afford to pay their share out of pocket. I don't know if we were all busy reading or if we were in shock at the prices, probably a bit of both, but we were quiet for a while. Before I could say anything, the strata manager spoke. I do need to raise an issue with you. The cost of this replacement is much higher than what was budgeted in the maintenance plan, and the life cycle that was budgeted for has an additional 5 years to the current timeline. In fact, the total cost exceeds the current capital works fund. No. Oh, this is my worst fear. At first, we all just sat quiet, probably in a bit of shock. Then everyone started talking at once. How did this happen? How do we not have enough money? Isn't that what the fund is for? How did you let this happen? Yeah, I can imagine the panic. The strata manager held up his hand on screen. We all went quiet. The strata manager shared the building maintenance plan on screen and zoomed in on the date on the cover page. It showed a date 10 years prior. He went on to explain that the building maintenance plan hadn't been updated for 10 years and explained that the cost of lifts 10 years ago were very different to the cost today. That's fair. The amount we have been saving was based on the cost of the upgrade 10 years ago, and even that was probably a little under budgeted. So there's probably a really big difference between. Okay. I was both shocked and furious, unsuccessfully holding my anger inside. I barked at the strata manager. How were we meant to know that it hadn't been updated? Calmly, he said, it was raised at the first committee meeting when our firm first took over. He shared his screen and displayed an agenda from a previous committee meeting and zoomed in on a motion about the maintenance plan update. He then shared a screen with 3 AGM documents. And again, he calmly said, we can also see that historically a motion to have a new maintenance plan undertaken has been defeated at the AGM on 3 occurrences over the past 5 years. I don't remember any discussion about needing to have the plan updated. I vaguely remember a question of if we wanted to spend the money to have a new plan created, but nobody explained why we needed it and that this situation could happen. But when I expressed that to the strata manager, he reminded us that they've only been managing the property for 18 months, so they can't confirm exactly what was discussed historically, only what was documented in the records. You know what, that's fair. He then confirmed that as they had raised this when they first took over, this is in no way their fault. I think that's fair too. He then confirmed that he would let the committee think about what they want to do, but they will need to make a decision before they can proceed to next steps. So now I've had the committee blowing up our group chat for the past week. We're all freaking out about the cost. Everyone's pointing fingers at someone. Some are saying we need to hold the old committee responsible and saying that they should pay for it because they screwed up. Some are saying we should look for a new manager. But if I'm honest, I think we all screwed up on this. I think the committee and the owners all made bad choices, but we didn't understand the consequences of our decisions. How are we meant to know? We're not experienced in building maintenance planning and the financial management of an entire apartment building. I worked in a factory most of my career. How am I meant to know about this stuff? Isn't that why we hire a strata management company? So isn't the strata manager's job to ensure we understand the full scope of the decisions that are presented to us? Wow. So that story frightens the crap out of me because that is like one of my worst fears is when it comes time to replace a major asset in the building that there just won't be enough money there. Yeah. This story scares the bejeebers out of me. So what are your thoughts on that one, Tim?
Oh, yeah, a lift is kind of like a vertical car. It's got moving parts, machinery, all those sorts of things. And if you think about it, you need to service a car just like you
Yeah,
need to service a lift. You
yeah.
maintain it for as long as you possibly can. But after 20
So,
years, even a
yeah.
car's going to have a end of life
Oh,
itself.
yeah,
So you don't expect
yeah,
it to last forever. And it's not dissimilar to other things in a building that, ultimately are going to fail and break down. And, it's true that things perhaps aren't as built as well, these days as they were a long time ago. Things used to last a lot longer. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's inevitable. It's going to
yeah,
happen, whether it's the lift or other parts of the building. And what this does is it emphasizes just the importance of having a healthy capital works fund plan
Yeah.
and really planning into the future.
Yeah.
The good news is they've got more than one lift, and I've dealt with situations in the past where a multi-story, I think it was, 12 levels or so, had only one lift. So the good
They don't
news
really have a choice
for
then.
Arnold and the yeah, well, no, but the good news is at least they're not having to walk up the stairs,
That's
which
very true.
another client of mine a long time ago had to deal with. They had elderly people walking up multiple flights of stairs over the course of a 3-month period while the lift was being modernized. At least in Arnold's situation, they've got 3 lifts,
Yeah.
and if they hopefully fix one,
Yeah.
then the other two are still working, and people are developing massive
Yeah.
calves and quads from walking up the stairs every day.
I can think of nothing worse actually than having to walk up the fire stairs with my shopping. Like that was one of the
Yeah.
draw cards for me, making sure there was a lift in the building because I can
Pram?
think of nothing
Imagine a
worse.
pram?
Oh yeah, like when we had to carry the baby capsule, like having a lift was a godsend for me. So all right, so let's talk this one through.
It's not
So
all bad news.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So obviously, he says it's a 20-year-old apartment building, bought off the plan. Most of the owners have been there from the beginning. He makes the comment it's a nice building, maintained well, levies have been pretty reasonable, everyone gets along. So on the surface, this is a well-functioning scheme, right? But I think my first
Mm.
question when I was reading through this story, Tim, that like triggered off in my head was Arnold mentions that he was the one that raised the concern over the frequency of the lift breakdowns, right? I'm wondering if he hadn't, would they have been having this conversation at this point? So I realized when we were reading through the story, I don't actually know who's responsible for knowing that lifts are coming to end of life. And if I'm honest, I think I'm asking this question out of my own fear because I now realize that I don't know when the lifts in my building are going to be coming to end of life. And I don't actually know who in the building or within the scheme is supposed to notify me of that. So, how are owners supposed to know when an asset is going to come to end of life?
Well, depending on the asset, I mean, a lift, there are telltale signs. I mean, lift start making funny noises. It starts to function in a way that you wouldn't normally expect it to. You're seeing out of order signage. Um, again, similar to a car, it starts to do things in an unusual way, and you notice the frequency of these things increasing more and more. Again, like a car, they are going to break down every now and then, and that's why we have emergency phone lines in lifts, for example.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for the layperson, there are some telltale signs, and ideally for the lift maintenance contractors as well. Most, if not all, lifts are going to have routine maintenance,
Yeah.
usually on a quarterly basis. So you would like to think that the company maintaining it is also going to start to issue reports that are saying that maybe there are certain things that are breaking down.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to replace parts, for example.
Yeah.
So you're hoping that they will give you that insight. A lot of owners corporations as well will employ the services of a lift consultant. And what was interesting to me was when you said that the strata manager had organized 3 quotes.
Yeah.
Um, I would assume that nobody on this committee or the strata manager themselves are an expert in lifts.
I
I'm
wouldn't think
certainly
so.
not a mechanic,
Yeah.
so I take my car to get serviced. I don't service it myself, right? So
Yeah.
I rely on the experts, and yes, you can rely on a lift contractor to do that, but sometimes you actually need a second set of eyes on it. Somebody that is
Ah.
independent, who's actually reviewing their work and saying, well, it's maybe not being maintained as well as you'd like. I mean, people don't do that with a car. They don't. You
Yeah.
might take it to one mechanic and get a second opinion from another, and normally they'll, tell you that the other person's work was terrible.
Yeah.
But that could be a really good move, and a lot of corporations do it is they get a consultant in to supervise, not necessarily supervise, but to check that are they actually adhering to the maintenance contract? Are they doing the things that they say they're going to do?
Yeah.
And importantly, um, are there sort of opportunities to replace parts before things break down. Because you've also got to remember that the lift contractor themselves, some people see them as opportunistic when they give quotes for
Yeah.
replacement parts. They sort of think of it like a mechanic,
Yeah.
and they maybe don't trust it and think, oh, well, they're just trying to drum up business, when
Yeah.
really the part was broken or the lift was coming to its end of
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
So that to me was curious. And the last thing that I found curious was, you've got a building here with 3 lifts, but apparently no building manager. I mean, a building with 3 lifts is usually pretty big, and if they don't
Yeah.
have one, they should certainly think about getting a building manager to help them out with this sort of thing.
Yeah. That's true, because I mean, but then I guess then my next question, obviously, as an owner who doesn't quite understand all these intricacies, would it then be the building manager that probably would have raised this? Like, because I just worry that in this story,
Possibly, but
Arnold
the
seems
building
to be the
again,
one who
they're
raised it.
not an expert.
Okay.
Yeah, and look, the building manager might, like the residents, for example, know, okay, there's a increase in the number of issues here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect them to be an expert in lifts either, but
Mm.
again, between those various parties, somebody surely would raise the flag at some point to say, we should really review this properly and not
Yeah.
just rely on maintenance anymore, but actually get a consultant, for example, to come in and do a wholesale look at this thing and tell us
Yeah.
without any bias,
Yeah.
um, should we look at this?
That's interesting. To be, I mean, as an owner, like, yeah, I live in a building that has lifts, and we've had situations where we've had some frequent, out of orders of the lifts and things like that, and all resolved now. But it never occurred to me that we should seek guidance from anyone other than our strata manager, our, the building manager, and the lift maintenance contract people. Like, I didn't even know there's a fourth party there that could actually come and see. I just assume, and I guess most owners probably just assume, that if you've got a maintenance contract in place with a lift company, they're taking care of everything. And yeah, it's interesting that you said that, because there is a lack of trust in our vendors, but also a blind trust at the same time. It's kind of a contradiction.
Yeah.
Like, I just assume they're taking care of it, but I'm also very skeptic that they're taking care of it. It's interesting for that to roll around in my head, and to realize that I myself, as an owner, have that contradictory mindset around our vendor. Yeah. Okay. So
Can happen. But
yeah,
it's not the only area in life. Like I said, mechanics, same problem,
yeah,
When do you trust them? When do you don't?
that's it.
These
That's
things
it.
happen.
All right. So the next important point, I think, is the Strata managed to confirm that the lifts were coming to end of life. All right. And the comment from the committee, I think, was fair, which was, what does end of life mean? And the Strata manager explains that the average elevator is designed to last 20 to 25 years of service with regular maintenance. Now, I myself, I only know that elevators have a lifespan because I've done some previous work with a lift company in my marketing roles, and because I've written educational content around building maintenance while working in the strata sector. But I think it's fair to say that most owners probably don't consciously know that an elevator has a lifespan. How are owners supposed to be aware of these things? Like, because I do feel like this is a little bit of a situation where you don't know what you don't know until it's too late. So they all seemed really surprised as to, what do you mean end of life, right? Like, they weren't anticipating it. And really, when you think about it, as we said, we all know cars don't last forever. We know a phone doesn't last forever. We know all electric things, like, they don't last forever. But I think when it comes to things in our building, as an owner, we don't think about the assets in our building that actually have a lifespan, that will circle around and need to be replaced at some point. We think of them as a standard and always, you know what I mean? Like, the lifts will always be there. Well, no, the lifts at some point need to be replaced. All sorts of things in the building probably have a lifespan that owners aren't aware of. And we're blindsided by it because we're just not aware of it. So how are owners meant to know this stuff? Like, is there a way that owners are supposed to know what assets in their building have a life cycle and what that life cycle end point is likely to be.
I mean, these buildings are not the Great Pyramids of Giza or, the Roman Colosseum that are built to last, the the test of time. Um, and buildings just aren't built to last forever.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Um, so, there are certain elements of a building that will last longer than others. Um, the products that are used in buildings now are not the same as what was used a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, I think, as you said, the example of a mobile phone. I mean, my Nokia 3310 lasted, years and years and years, and yet modern
I know,
phones
you
don't
should throw
last
those
nearly
things
as
down
long.
the
But that's
stairs and it was
because
like a
modern phones
brick.
have different. Yeah, yeah, but that's because modern phones have to use more battery because they have the internet on them, and so
Yeah.
where's the trade off? So you can say the same about buildings that maybe they don't have the same lifespan that they once did, but also they have, better features and things like that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, the question of why don't people know this? I don't know. I guess because it's not taught in schools.
Yeah.
To me, I guess in my line of work, it seems like common sense, but as the saying goes, common sense, is subjective and not
Mm.
always so common. And that's not a criticism of people because I don't think everyone needs to know everything. I think if you come across yourself finding that you don't know something like this, then the appropriate response is to be curious about it, not to
Yeah.
start blaming other people because you don't know something. And it sounds like there was a little bit of that going on
Oh,
amongst
yeah.
the committee's chat, sort of
Yeah.
starting to finger point as to,
Yeah. Oh, look, human
well,
nature,
it's,
that's
this
our
person's
response,
fault or
right?
that person's
We
fault.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it happens. And the
Yeah.
point is, none of that is going to fix your lift.
Yeah, that's
And
it.
so, really, the energy and the focus there should be if there is a gap in my knowledge, then how do I close that gap? Not how do I blame
Yeah.
somebody because I didn't get taught something.
So on
Blame your teachers at school for not teaching you that, I
well,
guess.
that's right, that's it. Well, I blame my teachers all the time for not teaching me
Yeah.
how to do my tax properly.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Everything.
like, how that's not a
That's right, yeah.
class, and yet home economics is. Anyway. So I'm thinking in my head now, right? So as an owner, how am I supposed to know when my lifts in my building are going to come to end of life? So if someone's watching this episode and they go, oh, you know what? I'm like her. I don't know when my lifts are going to come to end of life. Is that in the Capital Works building maintenance plan? Like, is that listed in there? Like, if I went and read my maintenance plan document that I know is sitting somewhere,
Mm.
would it be listed in there when that lift is likely to come, like when its life
Yeah.
cycle is up?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very surprised if any consultant was preparing a 10-year capital works fund plan and overlooked the fact that there was a lift in the building because that is one of the most significant expenses
Yeah.
of the building's life cycle. I mean,
Mhm.
we're talking in excess of $100,000, upwards to 200,000 per lift. And
Yeah.
so to overlook that would just be catastrophic. But
Yeah.
yes, you could expect that to be in there. But the question always becomes with the engagement of a consultant for a 10-year plan is how much access to information do they have?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
they have access to all of the lift logs and when it was installed and which manufacturer it was and what part of the
Yeah.
world it was manufactured in and all these sorts of variables can occur. Were
Mm.
they given access to that or did they just do a walk around to the site and notice there's a lift and this building is about 20 years old, so therefore my estimation is that
Estimations.
it's roughly coming to the end
Yeah.
of its life. As they're planning that in the 10-year plan, well, which year do they put that in and how much cost do they associate that
Yeah.
with? I mean, that's a different field of expertise,
Yeah.
um,
And it's interesting that you've just
that
said
these
that, Tim.
consultants live in, and it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, because my brain's now just triggered off on what you've just said then. Like, at the end of the day, they can really only
Mhm.
estimate this, right? Like they don't have crystal ball, right? They can only estimate it. And even if they knew all, as you said, they had access to, and I don't know what all those documents are you talked about, but if they had access to all of that stuff, they could then obviously use the manufacturer's recommended lifespan or expected lifespan, etc., to forecast that. But at the end of the day, exactly like what's happened in Arnold's building, you know, in theory, they've said the lift is supposed to, the lifespan, 20 to 25 years. They've budgeted as if it was going to be 25 years, and now it looks like the lift is already here, coming to end of life at 20. So 5 years is actually a really big gap financially for budgeting. So really, there's no way you can 100% know when your lift is going to come and or need to be replaced. Like even that lifespan is an estimation, right?
And not only that, but the cost. I mean, this
Yeah.
plan was produced about 10 years ago. And so the question you have to ask yourself is 10 years ago, could they have predicted the global pandemic happening
Yeah.
and what it did to the global economy? Could they have predicted the current, economic crises that are happening in today's world, the rates of inflation, all of those things? Definitely not.
Mm,
And so, yeah,
that's
it is
true.
very much an estimation. You're asking somebody to predict the future. None of us can do that successfully. We can do that within the best of our abilities, and the consultants are skilled in that respect. They are much more skilled than you or I are
Yeah.
in their line of thought. But at the end of the day, it is predicting the future.
Yeah. And I guess okay, so I guess that flows nicely into the next point I guess I wanted to talk through is the maintenance plan, or I don't know whether some people refer to it as the capital works maintenance plan, or for anyone who's watching this, who doesn't know what that is, can you explain
Mm,
what it is and how it's used for the budget?
sure. At least where I'm based in New South Wales, you have two main uh, documents in this respect. For newer buildings, it's been legislated oh, about a decade ago now, I think, that they would have an initial maintenance schedule. So, an initial maintenance schedule is where the developer of the building essentially engages a consultant to compile all of the documentation about the different building features to tell the future owners what is the routine maintenance requirements. So, how often do you have to wash down the paint for the paint to last? How often do you have to maintain the lift? Is there a specific methodology, etc.? So they're very complicated documents that are mainly seen in newer buildings. So Arnold's not going to see that in his
Yeah.
building, but it does have an impact on the lifespan of some of these things. And if you
Yeah.
follow it, it's again, it's like having a car and actually following the service manual and changing the spark plugs at this point in time, as opposed to just winging it.
Yeah.
So that's the initial maintenance
Yeah.
schedule. Then you've got what's called a 10-year capital works fund plan.
Yeah.
They used to be called a sinking fund plan. I think that was a reference to the building literally sinking if you didn't
Uh,
maintain it.
yeah.
So they're now called a 10-year capital works fund plan. And that is designed to estimate the future expenditure in relation to these major building elements. The
Uh-huh.
lifts, the
Yeah.
the rooftops, the painting, any waterproofing throughout. They not only try to estimate when those things will need to be replaced, but also what the cost will be. And the idea behind this is that it allows owners corporations to start to put aside a suitable amount of funds to meet those expenses when they arise. So when the lift does break down, you've got a nice, healthy capital works fund that is sitting there ready and available for you to spend that money. So that, in a nutshell, is how it works. And in principle, if everyone could predict the future, then it would be something you could follow very easily. The reality is that the 10-year plan is a guide. It is
Yeah.
not to be taken as a absolutely correct document. It should be reviewed regularly because, for example, there can be unforeseen expenses coming out of the capital works fund. You could have massive burst pipes, or
Yeah.
maybe something that was supposed to happen in year 10 happens in year 5. These things can all move around. So they can be impacted quite quite easily.
Yeah.
And so in Arnold's case, to have gone 10 years without reviewing and updating this thing means that the document is effectively useless, because it's
Mm,
no longer accurate in any semblance, to be honest with you. It might still tell you about what building elements there are, but it's certainly not accurately telling you how
yeah.
much it's going to cost, or when those things need to be done. So that's why in New South Wales, we have legislation that it must be an agenda item for every AGM to consider the 10-year plan and to
Yeah.
think about updating it and getting it renewed. And then from there, it's then up to the strata manager and the committee and the building manager and everyone else involved to then look at this thing and say, okay, well, should we start to get quotes for these things or get consultants to help us get quotes?
Yeah.
Um, but if you take a step back, it's a document that gets reviewed alongside the budget every year. And so when you're setting your levies, you should really be looking at this going, well, are we edging towards that target, or even exceeding it slightly so that there's a buffer so that hopefully we never have to raise special levies. It was
Yeah.
created as a tool to try and deal with the fact that most strata schemes back in the day were simply dealing with things by surprise special levies, which
Yeah.
sounds like your absolute nightmare, and I think is the
Yeah.
nightmare of many strata citizens out there.
Like it's what I live in fear of. I live in fear of just getting this massive big special levy bill that I can't actually jump over. And yeah, it it frightens me from a financial perspective as an owner. So you've just said something really interesting to me. So and it's something I was going to question because it implies, like, the story kind of implied that the reason that this has kind of happened is because they waited they waited out the 10-year cycle of the plan, right? They and it seemed like multiple times by the sound of the strata manager was like it was raised at the AGM multiple times to get a new one, and they've said no, right? I'm going to put my owner hat on here and say, well, I would probably think the same thing, right? I would go, well, hang on, if it's a 10-year plan, why do we need to pay money to get another one done until the 10 years is up? But what you've just explained then makes perfect sense. And it's funny for me to hear this. I say this to people all the time. Doing these discussion episodes helps me so much as an owner understand the reality of the situation I'm in as an owner, because in one of the properties I have, we've just had our plan redone. And where you were saying that, if you don't get it done, if you don't get it refreshed often enough, then there's no way the price that's going to be in there is going to reflect the reality in 10 years' time. And that's actually what happened to us. So again, I think we
Mm.
probably waited way too long to get our plan updated. And our recommendation per lot entitlement went from, I think it went up something like 600% or something. Like, so where we thought we were doing amazing and we had the right amount in our capital works fund because we were aligned with this, with what the forecast said it should be in the plan, and we thought we were doing amazingly, and then we got the updated plan and realized that we are actually so far behind, and we're lucky because we have a very caring committee, and we're going to put some plans together in how do we accelerate ourselves up to where we need to be and things like that. But seeing what has happened in this story and knowing what's happened in real life for me as an owner around waiting too long for that plan to be updated, I think that this could be a huge issue for so many owners corporations and around Australia, like, because we don't know what we don't know. So, and as Arnold has said here, they didn't say no to updating the plan because they didn't want to. They just said no because it was an expense they didn't think was important, right? And as owners, we all know that we tend to say no to an expense at the AGM if we don't think that it's needed to be done. And they obviously didn't realize that it needed to be done. But it makes me wonder. So I guess I would have asked before you said that. My question, I'm sure the question a lot of owners would have asked is, but if it's a 10-year plan, why have they done, like, why are they in the wrong for not refreshing it before 10 years? But you've just explained that. And I guess my question is, as an owner, how frequently are we supposed to get our plan refreshed? Like if we want to be diligent about what we're doing and we want to make sure that one, we don't end up in a situation like Arnold, and we don't end up in a situation where we're like my current building where we have this over, within a 12-month period, we've gone from needing the levy per lot entitlement to be here and now it needs to be up here. How do we avoid that? How often should we be getting that plan renewed to avoid this happening to us?
Realistically, probably
Yeah.
every year, which is not an
Mm.
answer that people are going to like hearing because it's an annual
Yeah.
cost then. But if you want it to be as reliable and as accurate as possible, then you would get it updated every year. Look, that's up for debate, and
Yeah.
some will say every 2 years, some will say
Yeah.
every 5 years. I mean, New South Wales legislation says it has to be reviewed every 5 years. It's debatable about what review means. Does review
Yeah.
mean, yes, we looked at it and put it back in the drawer? But if you're gonna use it and you're
Yeah.
gonna rely on it, then getting it checked regularly is important because the balances of your capital works fund are gonna change and the
Mm.
needs of the building are gonna change. And I think
Mm.
it's crucial as well when you're getting these done that you actually try to give as much context as possible
Yeah.
because a consultant isn't gonna know, the last
Mm.
time, well, how old's this paint?
Yeah.
How old are these things?
Yeah.
If they don't have that baseline, then that information can be kind of useless. I
Yeah.
think great strata
Mm.
managers are going to have hard conversations with their clients.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
Perhaps it's
agree.
been listed on the agenda every year and simply,
Mm. Just read as an agenda item and people go, "Oh, no, we don't
yeah,
wanna spend that money," but I agree with what
yeah,
you're saying. So, yes, it's gonna be a
yeah,
hard
that's right.
conversation, and people are not gonna like the idea of having to pay every year, but when the possible side effect of not doing it is ending up like Arnold and having 3 lifts that all of a sudden need to be replaced in the next 12 months, and you don't have enough money in the capital works fund, and everyone's gonna get like a $60,000, I mean, I don't know, I'm just randomly throwing numbers out there. I haven't done the maths, but, even a $30,000 special levy that needs to be paid in, 30 days, I mean, if that's the possible outcome to not paying to have this plan reviewed every 12 months, I'd rather just pay to get the plan reviewed every 12 months because it's gonna be way cheaper than a surprise special levy because we waited too long and what we've been budgeting for just doesn't cover the reality of the expense when it happened.
I mean, that part of it is getting it updated, but then the other part is having the hard conversation about increasing levies, which you touched on is, has been a systemic issue in Strata for decades. I mean, I started in 2009 and Um, eh, you'd be lucky to get one or two or three owners at an AGM back then, and the numbers have increased now. But certainly, a lot of the conversations that were being had were centered around how do we keep the levies as low as possible, which is what led to New South Wales legislating that every strata scheme had to get a plan done. Um, and then later on legislating that it had to be followed to the best of their ability. So we know that that was a conversation for a long time. How do we keep levies as low as possible? And
Mhm.
again, some owners corporations had the foresight to realize this is not going to play out well for us because ultimately we're going to need to face these expenses. And the old saying was, well, just raise a special levy. And
Yeah,
then the people that are now paying those special levies are, the ones that are suffering from it. So
yeah,
that happened a lot, and I think owners are starting to wise up to this. It's a conversation that sometimes as a strata manager gets a little bit easier with the passage
yeah,
of time and with people realizing it that look, this is important that we actually put aside money and that as a strata scheme we can invest some of that money into like a term deposit or something. And that was part of the reason a lot of owners didn't want to put money into a capital works fund because they weren't getting interest on it and it
yeah,
was better sitting in their offset
yeah,
account, which I get. So that's been a hard conversation. There is a slow shift of people sort of moving in that right direction of
mm,
going, well, if we don't put the money aside today, we're going to be paying for it in future. I think there's still a little bit of sentiment out there of people saying, well, I'll be gone by then, so it's not my problem, and that
yeah.
that
That's
can be
what I
problematic.
was gonna say. So because
Um,
we've had those
Especially
conversations.
people buying in.
Yeah, we've had those conversations in some of my committee meetings recently about, well, if we need to increase what we're putting into the capital works fund, do we want to do that, or do we just want to accept there'll be special levies in the future? And as you've exactly said, there's the people on the two sides of that fence, the people that are going, because I'd rather have that money, coming off my home loan, um, than sitting in a bank account that's not doing anything for me. So there's definitely that side of the conversation. But then there's also the other people that, as you said, have become a bit more savvy to the reality and are like, well, hang on, no. Because at least if we're saving incrementally, then if someone leaves, we don't then have a situation where the new owner goes, well, hang on, why have I got, a $30,000 special levy? No one told me about this, all those things. Like, you should pay your portion while you're here, right? So you definitely have those two sides of the conversation. And in many of the committees I'm in, there's two sides constantly having the conversation. But I think overall, I'm seeing that people are a bit more, regardless of whether they want to actually incrementally save into a capital works fund or whether they want to have a special levy, they're a lot more open to the conversation of what is it actually going to cost and are we being realistic about it? You know what I mean? So I do think there is a bit more mindset shift from owners in Strata towards that stuff rather than just voting things down because it costs extra. But I do think there's also a lot more understanding from committees that how you get buy-in for increasing a levy is a skill in itself. Just saying, oh, levies are going to increase, that's just not the approach. Like, if a situation has occurred when you need to increase your levies, especially steeply, and sometimes, as I said, one of my buildings, that's exactly what we're up against because we thought we were doing the right thing with our capital works fund and we're actually really, really far behind. So we need to now accelerate up and catch up. So it is going to be a reasonable increase in levy, but the committee was able to have a really good human conversation and say, well, let's not just shove this on the AGM agenda. Let's look at how we're going to communicate this to the owners and help them understand how this happened, why it's important, how it will benefit them. So we've really understood that this is a communication activity and it's one that we're not actually just throwing to our strata manager. So we're actually navigating this ourselves with the support of the strata manager. But we've now understood that if we don't handle this correctly, yes, there's a high probability people will just push back and say no. And that's detrimental, you know what I mean, to long-standing financial viability of the building. So I think things are shifting a little bit, but I think it only shifts once people understand. Once people have that comprehension of the future impact if you don't go about this the right way. And I think that leads to the next point, Tim. So Arnold states, I don't remember any discussion about needing to have the plan updated. I vaguely remember a question of if we wanted to spend the money to have the new plan created, but nobody explained why we needed it and that this situation could happen. So I can see that this would be a common situation, right? And as we said, it is common to kind of, specifically if it's like seen as an admin expense, like maintenance plans, to just vote no at an AGM if something's going to cost extra money. But if we're able to explain things better and get owners to understand the impact of the vote and why we're increasing levies or why we have to have an additional expense to get a maintenance plan update every single year, if we can get that understanding right, I think we'd get less pushback. But how, from a strata manager's perspective, and I'm always interested in understanding this, from a strata manager's perspective, where are your limitations? Where are your hands tied on how you could actually help owners understand those things, because at the end of the day, you communicate mainly with committees, right? And then really the only time that you're mass communicating with the owners corporation is right there at that AGM. So really, is this a solely a strata manager responsibility, or is this now a committee owners corporation responsibility as well?
Well, if I'm thinking about a typical AGM and I'm chairing it, there might be 20 plus motions on the agenda, followed by a committee meeting immediately after. I mean, these meetings can go on for hours.
Yeah.
And so there's an opportunity at that meeting for me to explain uh, the ramifications of each motion to the best of my ability and as effectively and efficiently as possible, to help owners understand the impacts of their decision. And everybody's different. I mean, some strata managers in the past for this building might not have explained that so much. And you and I have got all the time in the world here to talk about this at
Yeah.
length. But if you're running an AGM, you don't have all night to sit there and educate every single person on the history of a 10-year capital works fund plan, legislation and
Mm.
all of that. So, you have a small window there. Otherwise, people start getting cranky and tired. So you do your best in those circumstances. You also do your best to persuade people to make intelligent choices, but at the end of the day, it is up to the group as a whole to own their own destiny. And that's going to be impacted by individual personalities. There are some people there that might not be trusting of a strata manager. I certainly face that occasionally where somebody will just disregard everything I say purely because I'm a strata manager. Why, I don't know. But there are different personality types. There are some people that will be very loud in the room and speak against a certain topic, and others that will have opinions and thoughts, but not necessarily vocalize them. What ultimately matters is the vote at the meeting. So you try to educate people as best you can, and as I often say, I say that I run Strata like a business, in the sense that a business typically has a culture. Each strata scheme has its own little culture. As a strata manager, I see myself as a CEO executing the decisions of the company and of the board of directors, who I sort of see as the strata committee. So for me, I like to think I play an important role in shaping the culture of the owners corporation. But at the end of the day, it's not my company. I don't own the business. But it's my job to try and help them to do that as best I can. But unlike a business, I can't fire people for not, uh, being a part of the company culture, right?
Yeah.
They are owners. They have a right to be there. So it's a little bit different. So
Yeah.
I say all of that because at the end of the day, there's only so much time that you can put into an explanation at a meeting.
Yeah.
People are starting to educate themselves more and more. They're listening to, Strata Stories Australia. They're starting to become more savvy with this thing. They're starting to see or hear it so many times that they go, okay, I've heard this piece of information so many times. I think I understand it better now. A lot of people are starting to realize, for example, that um, as a prospective buyer, people are looking less at the levy rates and more at the capital works fund balance. And therefore, what really drives sale prices and the value of the property, which is important for a lot of people,
Mhm.
is going to be the health of the capital works fund
That's
plan.
it.
It is
Yeah.
no longer levies are low. Is somebody looking at a strata scheme and going, "Oh, levies are nice and low," um, used to be the norm. Now they're saying, "Hang on, levies are low.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
red
like a red
flag.
flag
Something's
now.
not right there." Yeah, exactly. And it didn't used to be, but you hear that. And even, for example, real estate agents now
Yeah.
starting to ask the question as they sell properties, what's the balances looking like. So
Yeah.
that, I think, is better. What you don't want to start doing as an owners corporation is start thinking, oh, how do we strip away as many costs as possible to try and save money?
Mm.
I've seen that play out before.
Yeah.
I've seen buildings, go, oh, let's cut down the cleaning. I mean, that was the last time we spoke.
Yeah,
Was a
that's
building
it.
that
Yes.
decided, maybe not with that, not knowing it, that, "Oh, let's strip back the cleaning because it's cheaper," but now all of a sudden the building is degrading faster. It's
Yes,
like, um, "Let's not maintain our car because 'cause that'll save a bit of money." Well, that engine is going to blow up in your face a lot sooner if you
that's
don't
it.
maintain it.
100%, 100%. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I sometimes think now starting to really spend time understanding, the day-to-day situations that keep happening in Strata, I start to question if if coming together as an owners corporation once a year is really just not enough. So when you think about it, if
It's
that's
not.
the only time that the owners corporation as a whole, and I know it's not the case for all buildings, but a lot of the larger buildings, it is the only time that the owners all come together and actually basically check in with each other about what's happening and things like that. I start to
Mm,
think, is that not enough? Because I'm starting to think of when you buy into Strata, we think we're buying into an owners corporation, but really we're buying into a property investment group, right? And these are the people that we are co-invested in a multi-million dollar property. And yet we only come together and talk once a year. Like you would never do that if you were an investment group. Like you would be in contact much more. But we're not because we think of buying into Strata as very similar to just buying a home, but it's not. And I start to think that sometimes we're not communicating as an owners corporation enough.
yeah. I think a lot of people, though, also buy into their strata community, and that's the way I see it. It's a small community of people that are
Yep.
forced into a commonality. Um, don't necessarily buy into it thinking that there's gonna be homework attached to it.
Yep.
Um, so I get that. I understand people not necessarily wanting to learn about it. A long time ago, I did my own tax returns, and then eventually I realized that it was getting more complicated. I didn't want to have to learn accounting, and it
Yep.
would just be quicker and easier to pay an accountant who knew way more than me
Yep.
to do the job for me. And turns out that was a smart move. So I don't blame people for not wanting to get involved in this. Um, I think I definitely agree that meeting once a year is insufficient and
Yeah.
always has been. And I think part of that has come about as a result of the advent of email, where
Yeah.
people felt, well, we don't have to meet because we can just email. A conversation over email is kind of like, sending, it's like you and I having a conversation, and there's like a delay of several hours or days between what I say versus what you say, and things can take a very long time. So
Mm.
once a year definitely doesn't work. The other hidden disadvantage that people don't realize when they're not having meetings is that owners aren't being communicated to.
Mm.
If you're on a committee and you're just emailing each other all the time, that's essentially having conversations behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Nobody else that's not on that email trail knows what's going on. And I encourage my clients to have more regular meetings, even if they're just online votes where nobody actually physically meets, they just vote on a website.
Yeah.
But there's a process involved where a set of minutes is prepared and it's communicated out to the owners about this is the decisions that are being made in the building, this is what's happening. But you
Yeah.
can even go a step further than that, and you don't have to wait for meetings. You can do things like quarterly newsletters or monthly newsletters, articulating to the owners and even to the residents in some cases, all of this hard work that's going on behind the scenes.
Mm.
Because something that I've had to train strata managers to do over the years, and I've taught a lot of strata managers over the time, that you're busy doing all of this wonderful work for everybody. And this stands true for committee members as well, who spend a lot of time, put in a lot of effort,
Yeah.
but they're not communicating what they're doing to anybody. And so it's natural for people to simply assume that nothing is happening.
Yeah.
Um, and, for there to be criticism, a strata manager get criticized a lot about that. The only interaction that some owners have with them is the levy notices and maybe the occasional email without realizing how much is going on in the background. That is not anybody else's fault that they don't know what's happening unless you bring it to the forefront. So something
Yeah.
I like to do, for example, is a fortnightly update to the committee to say, here's all the stuff I've been doing. And what
Mm,
that tells them is, oh, wow, Tim has been really busy working for us.
yeah.
I don't need to chase him up, which takes up more time. I don't need to, question or to worry as much. Now I know, oh, all of this stuff's happening. That's great. If I've got questions about it, I can ask, but otherwise, I'm being kept informed. The
Yeah.
same goes when you have regular meetings. You are communicating to people, saying, here's what's going on, so that if people want to take an interest, they can. They don't have to. It's not necessarily their obligation to, but they can. And also to have those open forums where people can exchange ideas
Mm,
and meet and discuss things is where you start to see the culture really shaping. So
yeah.
where you can make a cultural change. You don't make cultural change in a business, for example, by just sending out memos to people. Occasionally you get together as a group and you
Mhm.
have a company conference or
Yeah.
a staff day or things
Yeah.
like that where you can talk about things. And then if you want to take it to the next level, you actually start organizing things like community events where
Yeah.
there's no agenda. It's just people who have a shared interest getting together and just, talking.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, because I mean, it is something I'm starting to think about as an owner and as a committee member. Like, you know, there's, over 100 lots in a property, and there's 9 of us on the committee, and us 9 frequently talk. We email, we're in meetings, we know what's happening all throughout the year. But the other 100 and something owners in the building don't really have a clue what's going on until the AGM comes around. And then, as you said, like AGMs they're long and you know what I mean? Like you're not there to have chit chat and catch up and just give everyone like, updates on everything. You're just there. It almost becomes a just go through and make decisions, motion after motion after motion. So,
Yeah. Well, it is.
if you're not, I
Yeah.
don't feel like owners corporations actually communicate enough.
Maybe. Depends
Mhm.
on them and what they want their owners corporation to be. You
Yeah.
know, I'm reminded of a quote by Alex Hormozy: "Own your own circumstances because no one else will."
Yeah, that's true.
And to me, that means it's up to each owner's corporation to choose its destiny.
Yeah.
What does it want to be?
Yeah.
Does it want to have a community aspect, or does it want to just be? I mean, you think about commercial strata schemes; they don't
Yeah.
necessarily need that as much.
No, that's
For
right.
them, it is, I'm running a business here, and
Yeah.
that's my focus and priority. So, every community is
Yeah.
going to operate differently, and
Yeah.
they can.
Yeah.
That's totally fine.
That's a good point. All right. So I think let's talk about the big question that we always talk about. So what could everyone have done differently
Mhm.
to improve this situation? Right. So, and I'm gonna actually normally we just talk about what could the owners have done different and what could the strata manager have done different. I think this time we're also going to add in the lift company, right? Because what you raised earlier on, I didn't even think about the fact that there's actually a third party involved in this because the people who were maintaining the lifts, what could they have done earlier to kind of let the owners corporation know that, guys, are you aware that the fact that this is starting to be a frequent problem is probably an indication of end of life. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm going to add the third one in. So we'll see how it goes. So what do you think the owners could have done differently to improve this experience? I mean, I guess the first one is not vote down having the plan redone for 10 years. But I mean, from your perspective, from the strata manager's perspective, what could they have done differently that would have changed this entire experience?
With the benefit of hindsight, definitely build up a healthier capital works fund plan, and to do that, seek advice
Yeah,
on what that should look like. That's the first step, making sure that you've got the money available for when it happens, because it will happen,
yeah,
and you want to be prepared for that as much as possible.
yeah,
now that they're in the situation, they could certainly do well to communicate to the residents. Look, we're aware of, there's some issues happening here. Yeah, if you do come across issues with the lift, please do report it, because sometimes people, there's the bystander effect. People assume that somebody else has reported it and then nobody does. So make sure it's
Yeah.
being reported. The next thing they definitely need to start looking at is getting a consultant in to properly assess whether these what are the what's the interim strategy?
Yeah.
What are the things we can do now just to prolong the life of the lift a little bit longer while we then look at modernisation,
Yeah.
and to then engage them on the tender process for that.
No. Yeah.
Um, from there, keeping in regular communication with the residents and with the owners, that's going to be vital. There are going to be disruptions here. There is going to be a lift that's out of order. Um, we are going to potentially do it one at a time, for example. Maybe there's one lift that's going now, but this is a good opportunity to look at replacing the others as well
Yeah.
and do a bit of a program and keep sort of 2 out of 3 lifts running at all time, but gradually go through that process. Please don't put your head in the sand and think that the other 2 lifts are somehow going to magically last a whole lot longer. They were all built and installed roughly at the same time, so be prepared for that as well. Um, and start putting the money aside. And not only that, but then start to think about all the other stuff in the building.
Yeah.
The lifts aren't the only thing that's going to go. So once you get through this project, don't forget you've got other things on the other side of it, and there's going to be waterproofing, windows,
Yeah.
rooftops. We don't know enough about the building itself, but there could be all sorts of things. So don't stop there. Don't think that once you've saved up enough money for this lift that that's where it ends, or even for these 3 lifts, because it's
That's a
not.
really good piece of
And
advice.
I would
Yep.
say,
Yeah.
yeah, and check what the lift contractors are actually contracted to do, and the lift consultant can help with that. But what are their obligations? Are they obligated to give a quarterly report, for example? Are they obligated to, do things that they're not doing or should be doing? Because it could be possible that they were engaged on a minimal basis in the
Mm.
beginning because people wanted to save money, for example. And now we need to look at, well, it's like when you buy a brand new car, you don't get NRMA roadside assist because
Yeah.
it's a brand new car. But, after a few years, you should probably get roadside assist.
Yeah.
Um, and, look at that. I think those are probably the main things that come
Yeah.
to mind
Yeah. And then
immediately.
yeah,
Yeah,
and then the
owners can
strata manager.
better
Can
do.
let's talk about the strata manager. So what what could the strata manager have done differently to improve this experience?
Well, I think you said the strata manager had only been appointed 18 months ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's not a lot they can do about the
Yeah.
performance of the predecessors there. Um, and, even insofar as the predecessors, they were doing, well, we don't really know because we weren't
Yeah.
present at the meetings. We don't know what was said. We don't know if it's a case that they articulated beautifully the need for a 10-year plan, but year after year it was shut down
Yeah.
or something. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you would need to unpack there. I think that the current strata manager and the committee and the owners and everybody ought to focus on what is going to move us forward in this project. I think you can go back and look at the archives and the records, but like I said before,
You can't
that's not
change
going
it.
to fix the lift. So
Mm.
they can't. It is what it is. You've got the money that you've got. So you need to now look at, have you got the right advice going forward? Have you got the right experts? Ideally, you've got a strata manager that has the competence to help with the communication needs of the owners corporation, to be thinking outside the box in terms of not just engaging experts and things like that, but how do we communicate this effectively? How do we bring people on the journey? How do we persuade people to make smart choices for themselves? Because as a strata manager, unfortunately, you are often your reputation can hinge on the decisions of your clients.
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of examples of bad Google reviews on
Oh
strata
yeah.
management businesses about decisions that were made by a committee or by an owners group, and
Yeah.
somehow that is the business's fault, and that's inescapable. So, as a
Yeah.
strata manager, you do have to be able to influence your clients to make smart choices. Otherwise, you're going to cop it,
Yeah.
whether you like that or not. So,
That's it.
that's something that they can do is to make sure that they're putting their best foot forward and really
Yeah.
leading this group through what is a really difficult time.
Yeah. And then let's talk about the lift company. So as I said, I'm going to put the lift company on the list here. So what could the lift company have done differently to improve this experience?
Well, you like I said, you need to look at the terms of their engagement, and what was it a premium service or something that they should have done? That's the first step. But in my experience, most lift companies are producing quarterly reports, and they're producing fault reports when they're called out to, breakdowns and things like that. Um, I think, yeah, I've seen examples in the past where I've seen the quarterly report come through saying, service checked, tick, and that was like the whole report. And I kind of look at that and go, okay, well, I guess what does that tell me? And again, it's like you go to your mechanic and you'd hope that you get a bit more detail
Yeah.
around what happened. And like
Mm.
I took my car to the mechanic the other day, right? And he's really great because he'll explain things to me, and now, I don't understand half of it,
Yeah.
but he does spend a good 40 minutes explaining all the things he did and all the potential future problems,
Yeah.
and that's a one-on-one action, and you've got to bear that in mind. I'm standing in front of him having that chat. Lift
Yeah.
maintenance contractors are not doing that. They're publishing a report,
Mm.
and then, well, what goes into that report? Is it understandable for the average person read? Like, I read the receipts for the mechanic, and I kind of some things I understand, and some things I'm just like, okay, that
Mm.
sounds right. And unless I take it to somebody who knows what they're talking about, then I just have to trust it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think the lift company ideally would be, producing detailed reports, explaining what certain things mean, calling up the red flag or putting up the red flag if there are things there they're saying, hey, this part needs to be replaced soon, and helping the owners to anticipate that
Mm.
as best as they can. And so when those quarterly reports are coming in, for people to actually read those things and actually make them usable for people to understand so that they can
Yeah.
anticipate.
So it's interesting that you've said that, Tim, because again, like when I'm in these discussions, like light bulbs go off in my head. So I we have a building that's got 2 lifts, right? And we have had, as I said, we've had situations where there was like a continual breakdown, and I'm realizing I know it got resolved, but I don't know what was wrong with that lift and what was causing that. And when I think about it, what you're saying is that there would have been a fault report for that. And when they're doing maintenance, like there's probably a quarterly report and all this. As an owner, but not even just as an owner, as a committee member, I've never seen any of those. I mean, is that because I'm supposed to ask for them? Like, again, this comes down to this weird situation where we
I don't
have
think so.
blind faith in the people we employ,
Mm.
but I also don't 100% trust them. But I've never thought to ask for any of these reports. Am I supposed to?
Would you know that they exist? I would say first, do they exist? Because
Yeah,
not every lift contractor's issuing a report every time they visit, but
yeah,
let's assume that they do, because most do. As a strata manager receiving that report, then I think it is important to disseminate that at least to the committee.
yeah,
Bear in mind, you get a lot of documentation
yeah,
as a strata manager. um, you have to decipher, well, what is it that I need to show the committee? It goes back to what I was saying about the things happening in the background.
yeah,
And there are some things that you wouldn't share with the
yeah,
committee. You might give them a fortnightly update and say, look,
yeah,
this is a summary of what happened. But
yeah,
if I'm issuing a strata information certificate, I don't need to go to the committee and say, look at this certificate I just issued. Um, so, but I think if you're getting those reports, just like if you're getting correspondence from owners. Like I don't share every piece of correspondence I get from owners with the committee because they may not need to see it, but certainly key pieces of correspondence that, in my judgment, the committee need to see, I would share those. Now, it's a question for the strata manager. Are they just saving and filing this thing and assuming that people are going to go and read it in the owner's portal? Chances are they're not. So therefore, it would be due diligence to say, hey, we've got this thing. If you're interested in reading about it, here it is. And there's I think, no harm in doing that. You wouldn't necessarily disseminate it amongst the whole owners group.
No.
I mean, you could, but the better option there is probably just put it in a portal and people can read it in their own leisure. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, there's so many things swirling around in my head now that I never considered before this conversation, Tim. Yeah. So I mean, look, it's been amazing. It's always amazing to have these conversations with you, and I know that I'm very lucky that I have this opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation of this volume with a strata manager. And I know I'm very, very lucky for that. And I know it's not available to everyone. And I hope that this not just shows what can happen when you can have a human conversation between an owner and a strata manager, but also that anyone who doesn't have the opportunity to have a conversation about this topic with their strata manager can now watch this episode and go on the same learning journey that I've just gone on. So I'm 100% grateful for the opportunity for this conversation, but I'm also really grateful that you've taken the time out of your day to actually stay on and have this conversation with us. So I'm really appreciative, and I just want to give a heartfelt thank you to you, because I do appreciate that this is time out of your business, out of your day, your life. And yeah, I'm really grateful that you do this for us.
My pleasure. I enjoy it greatly.
Wonderful. All right. So I am going to let you get back to your day. But I am sure I'm going to be calling you for future stories very, very soon. So I will let you get back to your day. That was a really great conversation. I always walk away from these conversations with so much to think about. So I'm going to let that conversation roll around in my head for a few days. And then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to actually record a learning outcomes episode. So as always, remember to hit the subscribe button so that you'll be notified when that episode goes live. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.